I mean, we started just by trying to get through this, right? Talking about pop culture, music, movies, people, all kinds of different things. And then, it was mostly lighthearted. And then I think it started getting more like serious and the racial component, I would say around last June.
It was pretty therapeutic for us to connect and talk about what was happening just with COVID from the onset. And then when George Floyd happened, I think it was one of those moments where it was difficult for both of us to process, because I think for the first time, there was a moment where the entire world had stopped. Then this video was released. And I think I think for anyone who lives in this country, it was like a reckoning for us for how to understand kind of how we were raised to believe the police functions, and have that come into conflict with the obvious history of systemic, racism that has happened, that is prevalent in so many, so much of law enforcement. Coming from a family where my grandfather was a chief of police in Taiwan, that I was always raised to hold the police in high regard, and my dad was in the military. And, but over the years, obviously just growing up as a person of color in the United States. And I think that's where our conversation started to really shift, that, was because we were just, it was like, I've had to reckon with this as a person of color, just to understand that, things are very troubled. Like the history of this country is very troubled. And to confront that history, it's hard. It's hard for anybody. And and then for us to start talking about it that night, it's like anger, confusion. We went through all the stages.
You also helped me sort of translate it from like a really a really bad like news thing, story, like an event, a really like a tragic one, a really bad, and like how someone I knew that I didn't even really process how they could, but how you would view that and how it could impact you differently than me. And I think you shed a lot of light on that.
We have never really talked about what it was like for me growing up in Bay and all the, just in Ohio. Cause, once I moved to Ohio is when I first encountered like actual full-blown racism.
Was that the first time, or like the most like
the first time was actually on a bus. Some friends from Ann Arbor that I went to elementary school with were visiting, and my brother and our friends were on this bus, and we took it downtown to I think to check out like a comic shop. There were two kids got on, and they were both white. But yeah, I was on the bus, and so we're on the bus, and as the kids were getting up, this one kid got up. He like turned around and said, like, get the off the bus, you. And that's the first time my whole life, and I was 11, and I was angry, and my brother and I and our friends, we were not raised to be quiet. So, we said we talked back, just like, but because my brother, being the wise person he is, he didn't like say anything. He was just like, you should be ashamed. He was just you should be ashamed of yourself. And I remember from that moment, like his face was smug, but the fact that we were talking back kind of shocked him, because I think that's what so many racists count on, is that kind of is the shock of the moment. Because I was shocked, and I can remember that moment clear as day. But the moment actually,
that's thing despicable. That sticks with me, it's that like bully mentality, right?
Yeah, it's like the thing that sticks with me was his friend's face, because his friend sat there, and the kid who said who did the racist verbal attack got off the bus quickly, which is what always happens. It's like they never say anything and then want to sit down and tell you. It's always like you know, being a coward in the moment. And I was like, you know, so he leaves his friend there, and his friend is I'll never forget the expression on his face, because he was embarrassed. And I've always wondered what the rest of his day was like. The guy who got off the bus, he sucks. Like, you know, I have no confidence that he's become a worthy member of society. I really don't. But I hope that moment was a learning experience for his friend. That it's like, if you're there, you're a part of it. You know, and we were the only people on the bus. There was no one else on the bus. It was just these two kids and us.
That's like something I would hope and feel like wouldn't happen. It's like, I don't want to admit, like, I wouldn't want to admit that could come out of someone's, but it does. It's great. It's just all.
That's what I mean, is like, without something like George Floyd, that there's, you know, there's no reason I would just, you know, oh, when we're eating wings at ABC, that I'm going to start telling you guys about this.
Hey guys, let me tell you about this.
Yeah, like, let me tell you about this horrible racist experience, this traumatic experience that happened to me. Because in some ways, the part that's frustrating is that when you are on the receiving end of a racist encounter, attack, whatever, it feels like it takes away your power, right? Because like in this moment, this kid just, you know, he just absconded off the bus. And then at OU, I was eating at a Wendy's, and this kid said something, and then he again basically ran out of the restaurant, because I like got up, and he like ran out of the restaurant. So it's always this thing of like, they know in that moment the shock feels like powerlessness, and it is like a vulnerability, and that's why they do it though, you know, like that's why they do it, because it's like confusion. Instantly, it's always like, is this actually happening?
You know, I don't think either of us is that confrontational, right? And so if someone comes a comment or something, you might like take a minute to process, like, wait, did that really happen? But I've never had anything like that even remotely happen to you. I mean, I can't even imagine.
Yeah, but like in terms of talking about it without something like, I mean, unfortunately, without something George Floyd, it is like sharing that experience it's no one likes to talk about when they felt attacked.